Alright, gather round, it's party time! Yeah! Welcome to episode 3 of the Anti-Human Devlog. In the previous episode, I showed off the first 6 enemy types, enemy navigation, and the first gameplay footage of the game. But the thing was that the gameplay was a little bit dull with just one basic weapon. And for the fact that you could just rotate around a structure and kite everyone in one spot, which kind of made it very easy. The first thing I did after this was that I added an avoid radius around enemies, which is similar to the avoid wave from the melee attack, where enemies prefer not to go into areas where there's lots of other enemies already, so they'll find another way to the player and flank them. And doing this made the game way harder, because I couldn't avoid them no matter what I do. But that was fine, because I was about to add more powerful weapons anyways. Besides the melee weapon, there's 5 weapons so far. The first is Old Faithful, an old-school single-action revolver that was passed down for generations down to Inspector Baron. This is the weapon that was already in the first 2 episodes. It has infinite ammo, good damage, and perfect accuracy, making it good for long range. The big downside was the slow fire rate, making it ineffective against hordes of enemies, which is mostly what you're going to be fighting. In the first episode where I talked about influence, I mentioned the game Blood. One thing I really liked about that game was that every weapon has a special alt fire. So you have this hairspray can that can be used like a flamethrower, but you can also light it up and throw it like an incendiary grenade. Or you have this voodoo doll that can be used to stab that guy all the way over there. Or you can deal the huge wave of damage that kills anything on your screen. Or you have this totem pole that shoots out magic energy, but you can also place it down and now you have a fucking turret! It's great! And I wanted to do something like that for this game, especially because there's only 5 weapons. So now, the Revolver has an alt fire that fires out this taser attack that does a tiny amount of damage but electrocutes and stuns enemies for a few seconds, leaving them vulnerable. The first alternate weapon I made is the Scrap Cannon. The concept is that it's a makeshift weapon made by another survivor that takes scrap metal and debris and fires out shrapnel like a shotgun. It starts out as a standard pump-action shotgun, having to pump another round automatically after each shot, but you can also manually pump with the tertiary attack, which by default is R. And when you have multiple shots loaded, you fire it like an auto shotty and you can blast entire hordes away until you go back down to 1 shot. But that's not all. If you have at least 3 shots loaded, you unlock the alt fire, which consumes 3 shots and shoots out red hot shrapnel, which deals way more base damage and lights enemies on fire, which I'll talk about later. So now this is looking like a standard weapon loadout. You have a pistol for backup, a shotgun for close range, an SMG for medium range, a sniper rifle for long range, and some specialist weapon. Which it will be, but I at least wanted to spice it up a bit. Pun entirely intended, because the next weapon is the Incinerator. A makeshift flamethrower, 2 words that should never be put together, that uses scavenged bottles of whiskey as fuel. It's a medium-ranged, fast-firing weapon, kind of like the SMG I mentioned, and it sweeps through hordes of enemies and lights them all on fire. The secondary fire throws out a Molotov that lights the ground on fire for a limited time and deals a decent amount of damage, but it consumes 20 points of fuel because, you know, you just threw it at the enemy. But enemies will try to avoid it and walk around it, so it may be more useful as an area denial tool than a damage one, as you can lock out a certain path by lighting it up, and enemies will either have to walk through the fire and get burned or get bottlenecked through a choke point. The fourth weapon is the IR-50, or the Ion Rifle 2050, after the year it was invented. A high-tech plasma weapon that's starting to get some military use at the time of the apocalypse. The Ion Rifle is like 2 guns in 1, having 2 firing modes you can swap between with R. One is the auto mode, which fires these plasma balls in full auto. Great at dealing rapid damage, but it has a bit of bullet spread, so it isn't too good at longer ranges. The alt fire charges up a high energy projectile that bounces around the area and deals massive damage to enemies. Yeah, remember Thrower from the first and second episode where you can bounce this projectile everywhere? Now you have it again! And another cool thing is that if it collided with the player, you catch the projectile and get some of your plasma ammo back, depending on how much it bounced. So if you caught it right before it disintegrated, it only gives you 3 back. But if it bounced off a wall just once, you actually get all of your plasma back. So you could possibly make these skill-based plays where you hit a bunch of enemies with a shot and make it bounce off a wall only once and you lose no ammo. The other fire mode is Focus Mode, where it turns into a semi-automatic rifle type weapon that shoots out these perfectly accurate lasers. Good for long range, but it's much less efficient on your plasma than the auto mode is. The alt fire charges up this mega laser that not only deals massive damage, but pierces an infinite number of enemies. So if you line everyone up into one straight line, you can kill or damage multiple enemies in just a single shot. The last weapon for now is the Magic Wand, which I don't have a better name for yet, but it's supposed to be from some dark magical being. So how about Wizard's Fury, Shaman's Bane, Priest's Punishment, or Witch Hunter's Scourge? I like the first and last one. One is simple and short, while the other is probably a bit too edgy, but I think it sounds cool. Anyways, this is the big specialist weapon that does all the crazy stuff. It has 4 special attacks that all take from a pool of a max of 20 magic points, so use it wisely. Like the Ion Rifle, it has 2 firing modes and 2 attacks for each. One is Elemental Mode, where you harness the powers of the elements and use them against your enemies. The primary fire shoots out this gust of wind, which is completely harmless on its own, but it knocks back light enemies very far and is super cheap, costing only 1 magic point. And it can also deflect projectiles to wherever you aim your cursor. And deflected projectiles also have a damage bonus that makes it deal more damage than it originally would've. It's pretty similar to Pyro's Air Blast from Team Fortress 2. Guys, I mentioned TF2! Please come back! The alt fire summons a lightning strike for the cost of 5 magic points. It creates a massive explosion that deals a decent chunk of damage, but it's mostly for the stun, shocking enemies for 5 whole seconds. The other fire mode is Explosive Mode, where its chaotic and incendiary energy is concentrated to create devastation. The primary fire is basically like every rocket or grenade launcher weapon in a shooter game. It fires out this fireball that explodes where your cursor was set, or if it hits an enemy, and it consumes 6 magic points. Simple as that. But the alt fire may be the most powerful single attack in the entire game right now. The alt fire shoots out a void projectile that explodes at your cursor or on an enemy, like the primary fire. But instead of exploding, it releases this vortex or black hole that sucks any enemy that gets into the outer layer into the center, which repeatedly damages them. And then it implodes and releases an explosion before finally disappearing. This is very powerful and can deal with big hordes, but it's the most expensive on your magic, costing 10 points. So it's risky to use, devastating to the enemy if used right, but devastating to you if not done right. And that's all. Now all I needed to do was add ammo packs into the game, and those are the guns. But if I'm only going to have 5 guns, I really need something to keep all of them fresh. And one idea I have is to have this shop or upgrade station, where you can spend parts to upgrade something about your weapon. Kinda like the merchant from Resident Evil 4, another influence I mentioned.
Stranger, what you need that for? Going hunting some bitches?
But I'm still kinda on the fence about it. Especially because I don't like deciding to add features into the game during development. I like having everything planned from the start. Because I had this really bad habit of slapping on new mechanics in projects I made years and years ago. Like, hey, that's cool, add that in. Woo, that's nice, add that in. Whoa, that's awesome, add that in. And it just became this mess that I put away before even finishing. And again, this is not my dream game. It may have 6,000 enemy types and 300 different guns, but I still want to keep this game simple, and save some more ambitious ideas for something else. I had the same dilemma when I was thinking of adding a dash or dodge move into the game. It'll be pretty fun to use, but so far I've designed everything around the player not having it. But at the same time, I'm still early in development, so it's now or never, and I'm tilting more towards never. For the upgrade shop, I'm leaning more on yes, but I want to keep it interesting instead of lame stuff like, oh, you deal 1% more damage. What if the bouncing plasma ball from the ion rifle explodes when it does its last bounce? Or what if instead of the overheat shot from the scrap cannon firing out a barrage of flaming shrapnel like a regular shotgun? What if it fired out this big ball of molten hot scrap that deals a lot of damage and splits into smaller fire shrapnel that goes everywhere? Or how about you take all those mechanical parts and use them to somehow put a sugar cube in each of the whiskey bottles that fuel the flamethrower, and now you can light up the ground with the primary fire. Boom! Homemade napalm! Except this one doesn't require gasoline and styrofoam and... And with that, here's the new and improved gameplay footage. So that's most of the gameplay done. Next up is the real sprite art. So now I gotta learn yet another talent because I don't know shit about art. But I think I got this. Now where's those kidneys I asked for?